Welcome everyone to our league preview of the Hudson Valley Football League. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined with my co-host, Marcelio Langella. Mars, how's it going?
It's going well, man. We were finally back in football season, and week zero's is this week, and so now we're finally back into some football, and it's kind of crazy because it kind of flew by.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys, as always, for joining into the show. This is our league preview, which is formerly our team preview. We'll be talking about the Hudson Valley Football League in this video. We'll be going over an overview of the teams, talking briefly about each, giving our opinions on it. Obviously, we can't address all the players and everyone we want to talk to. The video gets super long, so it doesn't mean we don't think you're a good player or that you can't make an impact this season. It's just based, again, we're in a bit of a time constraint, but appreciate everyone that is tuning in, and we'll have a good time kind of talking about this league, which is an important one. And obviously, before we dive into that, guys, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button if you're not subbed to the channel. Obviously, it'll notify you when future content's dropped on our YouTube channel. And also think about becoming a member of our Patreon team. There's a free membership, which you'll be able to see some announcements, some of our free content. And if you're a paid member, you'll also get exclusive content throughout the season. It also helps support our channel. So we really appreciate it if you consider that as well. All right, Mars, let's dive into it. We're going to be talking about the different teams. There's 8 teams in the Hudson Valley Football League this season. Croton Harmon being one of the teams that has joined from Section 1. 4 teams at the end make the playoffs, which is the normal standard, I believe the same as last year. And there's a couple of these teams playing in some week zeros, so will be interesting on some of the crossovers this year. Well, let's start with Albertus Magnus, and I'll talk about a couple teams that, Mars, and you decide which team you want to talk about. And we'll start with Albertus Magnus, coached by Coach Panfile. And I apologize, Coach, if I butchered your name, but this is his first season. And so congratulations, Coach, on being the head coach. I think he's been an assistant for a few years at Albertus Magnus. Did not get a chance to speak to Coach, unfortunately. Things have just been so crazy this summer. But last year, Albertus Magnus went 1-5. They did not make the playoffs. And, when you look at Albertus Magnus, who was in the Hudson Valley Football League last year, offensively, you saw some highs and lows for them, right? They were 5th out of the 7 teams in points. But at times, they could move the football. There's some guys who really stepped up for Albertus Magnus throughout the season last year. Interested to see if that happens again this year with some of the guys coming back. Defensively was a bit more of a problem, right? They were 6th in points allowed out of the 7 teams in the Hudson Valley Football League. And at times, gave up a lot of big plays. So defensively, obviously, is a big focus. Could get more consistent offensively as well, but interested to see how this new system kind of unfolds for them. A couple players to watch for them. Heath Miller is the one that stands out to me. I think he's an underrated player. Wide receiver and cornerback. Nice size to him at 6'1", 175 pounds. Was a Frank's finest defensive back for this year. And I do think this is a young man who can make an impact on both sides of the ball. Some of the other guys, Tommy Freeman, wide receiver and cornerback. He's a junior. Tyler Wine, he's a tight end, quarterback, and linebacker. So a couple other classmen who could make a big impact for Albertus Magnus this season. And then Jamison Brooks on that offensive and defensive line, the senior. He's going to be super important. Obviously, to me, the teams, the one that's won it last year when the championship between Tappan Zee and Greeley, there were 2 teams that probably had the most dominant trenches. And so if you're going to compete with those guys in the Hudson Valley Football League, you got to be able to compete in the trenches. And so Jameson's obviously going to be an important factor there. The next team I want to talk about, let's talk about Croton Harmon. They were in B last year. They've come to the Hudson Valley Football League. Did not have a win last year, coached by Coach Puccello. And so very interested to see Croton Harmon kind of going into this developmental league, the Hudson Valley Football League. I think it's important for them, right, to help build things back up. As they didn't have a win last year. And offensively and defensively was a struggle. They were last in points scored, last in points allowed in B. So we'll see then. I did get to speak to Coach, and they're bringing back some starters. So that experience will be really important. 5 starters on the offense, 2 on that offensive line, although they do need to replace their quarterback, which they're having a current quarterback battle to determine that. Defensively, they're bringing back 6 starters. So again, bringing back some veteran guys I think will be helpful. I think being in this league or, similar to some teams and programs similar in their situation, I think will also be beneficial. So I'm interested to see if Croton Harmon can make some noise coming down into this league. A couple guys to keep an eye on. Damon Level, running back and defensive back for them. Coach has raved about his work ethic. Connor Fahey, tight end and linebacker. and James Jones on that offensive line and defensive line. I mentioned trenches is going to be super important this year, Mars, if you're going to compete in this league and in any league. But Mars, what team do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Croton-Harmon, and I feel like it is going to be a big change for them, dropping out of B into the HVFL, and I feel like now that you kind of have a little bit more breathing room to kind of develop the program a little further, and the fact that you have a lot of guys returning will definitely help in that matter. And I think the biggest thing for them will be to kind of set this kind of precedent, or kind of build a program from the bottom up. And I think it's going to have to do a lot with these now returning players. Like the veterans really need to step up, and they really will set the stage going forward for the program. So I think I do agree with you. I think there will be some noise that could be made here with Croton-Harmon.
Yeah. Talking about the next team is Horace Greeley, and coached by Coach Dylan Clark in his second season. Last year, they had a very successful year. They went 7-2, did lose to Tappan Zee in the Hudson Valley Football League championship. And 3 of the last 4 years that Greeley has been in the Hudson Valley Football League, they have won 7 games, right? So one of the years being in they won the championship. But 7 wins 3 last 4 years has been pretty good for them as they continue to build up their program as well. And it's, they were good on both sides of the ball. Offensively, they were number 2 in points scored. Defensively, they were number 2 in points allowed. And they are bringing back some of their starters, which is going to be super important. 5'11" starters on offense, 2 on that offensive line. So there are some faces that are going to have to step up on that offensive line, and obviously replacing their stud quarterback from last year. So I know Coach mentioned, they were big spread last year because of the skill position quarterback. They're going to be, I think, a little more run focused this year. And Andy talked about it. They want to run the ball more consistently. That's obviously going to be super important. Defensively, they are returning 5 starters as well. And Coach emphasized that they're looking for a better interior pass rush. So, there's, they're a little bit light, right? There's some, they have a smaller junior class this year. So interested to see how the team comes together. A couple names to keep an eye on for them. Ben Weinstein is the first one that steps up. He was a Frank's finest. I think he committed to Colby College to play linebacker, and he's a really strong two-way player for them. I really like him. He is like an H-back running back for them. I think he's going to play some quarterback as well. And I love his ability to block, his ability to run, and defensively, he's a versatile linebacker. He does multiple things for them, dropping into coverage, blitzing. So he's a well-rounded player. Jason Kim is another one. He got hurt last year. His season got cut short. Another really important two-way player for them. But some other guys, Jake Diamond, Alex Schoonmaker, Kyle Rigger. These are some lineman guys that play on the defensive line, on the offensive line, and I talked about it. The trenches, those are going to compete for that title. These are some of the names I got to step up in the trenches. And Tucker Guglielmo is an outside linebacker and a wide receiver for them. They lost some skill guys as well, so getting Kim back is huge. Can some of these other skill guys step up and make some plays for them? And then the next team is Peekskill. Let's talk about Peekskill. Coached by Coach Gardner. Last year they went 3-5. They lost at Tappan Zee in the semifinals. And, when I look at this team last year, Mars, you've seen from Peekskill the last couple seasons, they've had some really strong defensive performances. And the defense was pretty good last year, too. They were 3rd in points allowed in the Hudson Valley Football League. Where things really struggled was offensively, right? They were 6th in points scored. Too much inconsistency for them. Too many negative plays. Good news, they're bringing back 9 starters on offense. So that's obviously definitely helps. 3 on the offensive line. All their skill guys pretty much, and their quarterback, right? So they've had at least 9 guys come back that had significant time on that offense. And so they're bringing back a bunch of veteran stuff. But Coach talked about they need to be more physical up front and at the point of attack. That's obviously going to be a huge point of emphasis, trying to generate more explosive plays defensively. They're bringing back 7 to 8 starters as well. So a lot of experience coming back from Peekskill. But defensively, although they're super aggressive, they love to blitz. They do have to tackle better. That was a bit of a struggle last year for them. Some guys to keep an eye on. Christian Preston, the quarterback. Coaches really talked about his growth. Last year, at times, was a bit of a struggle, so he could take a big jump this year. He's a junior quarterback. And a couple of their other backs. Darius Smythe, who's running back and secondary player for them. He was an impact player, a multi-sport athlete. Craig Jacobs is another one. So they can have a couple backs here that can make some noise. But it all starts to me, guys up front. Can they block? Can they move people at the point of attack? Some other guys, Craig Davis on that defense as an outside linebacker safety. Darnell Hinton, another strong kid. He's made some noise the last couple years. And Joseph Walker They call him JoJo Walker. Is a super fast guy. Going to be playing in the secondary and at wide receiver. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
How about Horace Greeley? And, Coach Clark, returning to the alma mater, definitely had a big momentum swing for the program. And he kind of, brought them back to the roots, especially with talking with him, going back a little bit more of a run-centric based offense. I know that for a long time, Horace Greeley was more in the spread and a lot of like quick throws, which, for a decent amount of time, that was kind of their system. But, with talking with Clark, I feel like they're going back to that run-heavy scheme. And, I think it's kind of that ground and pound, right? The defense, as you mentioned, was one of the best in the HVFL, and so when you have this system kind of tied to the defense in a way, it kind of actually melds perfectly. Like you mentioned, there are some guys returning. Jason Kim is obviously the biggest one to that's going to return because he was a playmaker last year. But I think that with the guys really buying into the system itself, and Coach Clark really just kind of emphasizing that mentality of that like aggressive and a more simple offense that makes it so that you can kind of be more in someone's face in how you play. I think that's really the big thing that I think really is looking forward to. Yeah,
and some injuries have really were in some key positions hurt them last year, even on their run to the championship. Next we'll talk about is Portchester, coached by Coach John Plato in his first season. So congratulations, Coach, on being named the head coach. Last year they went 3-4. They did not make the playoffs. Offensively, they were 4th in points scored in the Hudson Valley Football League. Defensively, they were 5th in points allowed. And when I look at, spoke to Coach offensively, they want to be more dynamic and explosive. I mean, that's kind of the emphasis on the offensive side. And the question is going to be at the quarterback spot. Like, where are they going to get at the quarterback spot? Defensively, the two words that he usually wants to describe his defense is fast and physical. I know that's kind of a cliche thing, but again, implementing your new system, implementing your kind of identity, it's going to be really important that they pick up on those mantras ASAP, right? But a couple guys to keep an eye on for Portchester. One guy who's come back, and we'll start at the skill spot, Alexis Morale, who's made some big impact plays for them at the running back spot. He's going to be super important for them going into this year for that offense. And then Jeremy Noel and Jacob Lopez are another guys at the wide receiver spot, at the running back spot. These are some skill guys who are going to have to step up in the new system to make some plays. And we mentioned the quarterback, right? Jefferson Navarro, Coach talked about his work ethic here. He's someone who can make an impact at the quarterback position. And then on the offensive line, you got Albert Parage and Carlos Palma. I mentioned it. I do think the Hudson Valley Football League, just like in most leagues, the team that has the most consistent play up front, and I mentioned already a couple times already in this video, I think is going to be the most impactful. And those are some guys to keep an eye on in the trenches for Portchester. All right, next team I want to talk about is Poughkeepsie, coached by Coach Floyd. Last year they did not make the playoffs. And looking at their team last year, it was a struggle, right? And Poughkeepsie has kind of run into some, the last couple of years have been a bit of a struggle for them. They were 7 in points scored out of the 7 teams. They were 7 in points allowed out of the 7 teams. But they are bringing back some veterans, right? And I think they're bringing back 7 starters offensively, 6 defensively. And, they talk about they need to get some better movement off the ball and conversions on third downs. I mean, third downs were a killer for them last year. It's going to be super important for them this year if they want to have a more consistent offense and stay on the field. Because they feel like the defense has been worn down. They gave up a ton of points at times, which again, tackling is another thing that coach emphasized on the defensive side. But some guys to keep an eye on, and they do have to replace their quarterback, and Mateo Howard and John Birdsong were a couple guys that were competing for that position as well. It's interesting to see how that comes out. But some guys to keep an eye on. Isaac Acevedo was the first one Coach raved about in his work during the summer, running back and defensive back. And you've seen Poughkeepsie over the last few years, even with some of the win-loss struggles, they've had some good backs come out of Poughkeepsie. So interesting to see if Isaac can be another one of those staples coming at. Tazir Gary, he's made some plays at the wide receiver spot. If they can get a consistent quarterback play and get him the ball in space, he can also be very impactful. Makai Lloyd is another name to keep an eye on. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
Yeah, talking about Poughkeepsie, and I feel like, you kind of mentioned before, defense was definitely a big struggle for them last year. And obviously that kind of sets the stage for the rest of the, every single game, because, if the defense really does struggle to kind of limit the amount of points that your opponent's scoring, then no matter, like, even if you have an efficient offense that can drive down the field, it's really, you're playing a game of catch up. And for Poughkeepsie, you do have a lot of guys returning, which is definitely a bright side. But it really has to do with this defensive play. I feel like if they can set the stage or really just set the tone, then I feel like offensively they can at least try to make some plays to really get some points on the board. Because yes, last year was a tough one for sure, but it seemed like they have more of a younger team last year. So hopefully, with more of those kids now becoming veterans, you now have more of possibly some consistency in their system.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we got two more teams left, and let's talk about the defending champs, and it's Tappan Zee, coached by Coach Iannucci. They were 9-1 last year. They won versus Greeley in the Hudson Valley Football League Championship. They've won now 7+ games in 2 straight years for them. And they were pretty much the dominant force. Outside of Greeley, this was the dominant team, and probably even more dominant than Greeley in the regular season. We saw they were number 1 in points scored in the Hudson Valley Football League, number 1 in points allowed. But they do have some guys they have to replace. They had some serious senior leadership that has graduated. And offensively, they do return 5 starters, 3 on the offensive line, and that's going to be super important. But they have to replace their quarterback, who was a big-time player for them, and senior Jack Tobin and sophomore Mason Chiappa were competing this summer for that position. Interested to see how that develops. And, they have a lot of positions, Coach mentioned it, on the offense they have to fill out. And then we're going to see if they can match that productivity from last year. Defensively, they have it even more, right? This was number 1 defense in the Hudson Valley Football League last year. 4 starters coming back, but 7 starters needed to be replaced. So a lot, defending champs have a lot of work to do. And I do think they still have some talented young men coming back to compete and help them compete to defend their championship. And some of the guys that keep on, Ronan Hunt, the senior defensive lineman and offensive lineman, thought he was a real nice impact two-way player for them last year. Disruptive up the gut for them. I like his effort. I like his ability to disengage offensive linemen. Colin Butler is another one, young junior running back and outside linebacker. Coach is raved about his summer work. Jack Piccioni, he's a big-time playmaker at the wide receiver spot. Going to have to be an even bigger two-way player for them. But this is a jump ball guy. You see a lot of go routes from him, but a real solid route runner for them. And then Benak Brunsage, a senior offensive lineman and defensive tackle as well. So it's really important. They bring back 3 linemen. 2 of the guys I mentioned are going to be impact players for them, need to be in the trenches if they're going to defend that title. And I think they have a chance at it this year. And then finally, to wrap things up, we have Walter Panis, coached by Coach Castro. Last year, they were 3-5. They lost at Greeley in the semifinals last year. And when you look at them offensively, I thought they were pretty strong. This was a strong offensive group. They were 3rd in the Hudson Valley Football League in points scored. They are bringing back 6 starters on offense, including 2 on the offensive line, but do have to replace their quarterback, Matt Makuto, who's a junior quarterback competing for that job. Coach talked about his work during the summer, but the big thing that he emphasized was being more physical in the run game and staying consistent up front. That's going to be the big thing for them, again, because they have a pretty darn good back coming back. They can open up some holes. They can have a dynamic rush attack and a dynamic offense. Defensively, they were 4th in points allowed. They are returning 5 starters as well. And they just talked about being more aggressive. That was kind of the emphasis from Coach speaking to him. But some of the players to keep an eye on for Walter Panis, first things up is Jack Doherty, running back and linebacker. He is one of the best players in the Hudson Valley Football League. He was a Frank's finest at the linebacker spot, but a really strong two-way player for them. Good speed to him. I like his ability on defense, that he can drop, he can blitz. And he's going to be such an important impact player for them. But who are the guys can step up around him, especially up front? Leland Kane, who plays at the center spot on defensive line. Jonathan Guglielmo, offensive lineman and defensive lineman. So these are some guys who are going to have to be impact people in the trenches to open up holes for what could be an opportunity to be a real good rush attack. And then obviously their quarterback to create some balance in Makuto. And then Lucas De Lima, who's a pretty strong kicker for them in the Hudson Valley Football League, also plays tight end. Mars, final thoughts. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, Tappan Zee definitely is going to be trying to return back to the HVFL championship. You already mentioned it earlier, but the coach is obviously more hopeful but concerned at the same time. It's hard to really fill in a lot of that talented roster that they had last year that really was just keeping this productivity like at a top level. So, you do have guys that are returning 5-11 on offense, 4-11 on defense, but I think the most important is the offensive line. 3 out of the 5 offensive line are returning, and so it does kind of set the stage that if they do have this consistency, then they could have a chance to return back to the championship again, because the last 2 seasons they kind of they made it back-to-back, right? Had lost against Peekskill, won against Greeley last year. So I feel like they are kind of back in their groove, but it really will depend on a lot of these returners and even the young guys if they step up to kind of fill in the shoes of all those kind of guys that had left last year.
Absolutely. And with that, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you guys as always. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that thumbs up and hit that sub button, and also share this video with those that you think would enjoy this type of content. This is Frank and Mars from Fam Sports signing off. We'll see you guys soon.